Welcome back. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. Thank you. This is episode number 24. So today we got a short episode due to all of the holiday commotion. I wasn't able to record sooner, so it's now Saturday evening. So of course, with the show being released Sunday morning, I had to make it short in order to be able to finish the recording and then edit it and get it out to everyone. So I apologize in advance. This week, we're only going to be getting into my pick package for tomorrow. So let's get into it. So to start, of course, we got to get into my pick three. Now, this week is probably the most difficult for all of my picks out of any week this entire season. Obviously, we already had 4 games we played. 3 on Thursday, and then 1 yesterday on Black Friday. So it leaves a shorter, condensed schedule for Sunday's games. And a lot of these games, actually every single game, I wouldn't be surprised regardless of who wins the game. So, legitimately, I think there's a legitimate argument to be made for every single team potentially winning their game, which made all of these picks definitely more difficult than usual. Usually there's at least 3 or 4 games where I feel like, this one's pretty set as far as who's going to win. In the case of all 5 of these picks that I have, they legitimately, I could be 0-5 and I wouldn't be surprised. But we're going to get into it, starting off with the pick 3. So the first game in my pick 3 for this week, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are 3.5-point favorites at home against Arizona. Now, again, like I said, this is going to be a tough one. I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona was able to pull off the win. The only thing where I feel like Minnesota is going to be able to pull it off is just because, for 2 things. One, Arizona is traveling across country from the West Coast to the Midwest. It's not as far as, coast to coast, but it is a little ways. And, they're also going from south to north. So I think that'll play a factor, especially when it comes to just weather conditions. Now, granted, Minnesota does play in a dome, so it's not going to affect the field the play on the field. But just in terms of going from one environment to the other, granted, Arizona's not very hot right now. But like I said, just a difference in time change and general climate idea. I think that will be a factor. Also, I think, the strengths of the Minnesota defense actually play in well to confusing quarterbacks. And considering there's a history of Kyler Murray maybe not studying as much as quarterbacks should, I think that'll play into him making a couple of mistakes. And Minnesota's defense is very opportunistic. And I could see him throwing a couple picks or being confused by a blitz and having a strip sack fumble. And I think those type of situations are what going to lead to Minnesota pulling off a win. I do think the game's going to be very, very close throughout the game. I haven't looked at the line as far as the total yet, so I don't know whether or not I'm predicting it to go over or under. But in terms of the game itself, I do think that Minnesota will be able to pull off and get the win. And it'll be a close one, but they'll pull it out for the first game in my pick 3. Now, the second game in my pick 3, I'm going with the Washington Commanders to beat the Tennessee Titans. Now, Washington is at home. They're favored to win by 6. This one's another game that I struggle with. I can definitely see going either way. The Titans just pulled off an impressive division win against the Texans on the road. They're going on the road again, this time against Washington. And on paper, I could see the Texans being looked at as being a better team as Washington. Washington has been on a skid recently also, so considering the trending play of both teams, this 6 point seems a little bit much to me. I feel like this is going to be like a 3-point game or less. But nonetheless, I'm still sticking it out with Washington to get the win. I believe Brian Robinson Jr. should be playing in this game. I believe he missed the last game. So that'll definitely help their offense. I believe last game they didn't have Robinson nor Eckler, so that's really hard because a lot of their passing game is set up by their running ability. They have 2 very good running backs. I do think Eckler is going to miss this game last time I checked, But with Robinson being back, that'll make their offense more potent. And I think that I'm not believing in Will Levis having back-to-back good weeks in order to beat a team who's capable of scoring 30. Now, Tennessee's defense is generally pretty good, so Washington may not score that much in this game, but I just don't believe in Will Levis enough to believe that he's going to lead his team to score 30 points in back-to-back games. So, with that being said, I think Washington's defense will do enough to keep Levis contained, and since they are at home and they'll have the crowd behind them, that I think that Washington will be able to pull off the win. I don't expect them to cover the 6 points, but I do think they will end up getting the win as the second pick at a part of my pick 3. And then the last game as a part of my pick 3 is probably the biggest game of the week in terms of both records being ranked both teams being ranked the highest. So I'm actually going with the upset in this game. I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles to beat the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens are favored by 3, and Philadelphia is on the road going to Baltimore. This is, in my mind, a matchup of two people who are in the top 3 in MVP votes between Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. To me, they're 2 and 3. I have Saquon at 2 right now and Henry at 3. But this game could definitely change that because they're playing against another good team. Now, earlier in the season, I said the biggest limitation for Philadelphia was their defense, especially their secondary. But in their last 4 or 5 games, Philadelphia's defense has definitely stepped up. I think that's been the huge part of why they've been able to continue on this win streak. And I think that's what's going to be the biggest factor that gets them the win, even though they'll be on the road against Baltimore. And Baltimore has come off of a few tough week games, losing to Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago, and then I believe 3 or 4 weeks ago when they lost to Cleveland. So Baltimore knows they can't slide too much further back behind the other top 2 or 3 teams in the AFC. They want to keep pace and at least try to be in a spot for that first round bye. I don't think they really have a chance for it, especially since Kansas City has a tiebreaker on them. But nonetheless, I'm sure that's what they're aiming for at this point. But I just think that with the way Philadelphia's defense have been playing so far, they'll be able to stop the big explosive plays from Baltimore and pull off the win on the road, even though they're favored to lose by 3 points. Now, for the next pick, we got to get into my lock of the week. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, this one was the toughest by far. This is probably the first week where I really don't have much confidence in my lock of the week, but this is the one where I felt like out of all of them, this is the one that should win the most, even though they don't have the largest spread. So I'm taking the Houston Texans on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, just like last week in their division game, anytime you have a division rival, the game's going to be tough. It doesn't really matter what the records are. They will always play each other tough just because there's so much familiarity within each team and their schemes and the coaching staffs and stuff like that. Now, Jacksonville has been on a skid. Houston has also been on a skid, especially since they just lost the division game last week to Tennessee, which was a team that most people expected them to beat pretty easily. I was one of them. Actually, Houston was in my pick 3 last week, so they actually were my only loss in my pick 3 last week. So for me to kind of double down this week and use them as my lock of the week is a bit scary, especially considering that I've been on a roll with my lock of the weeks. I believe I'm on a 6 or 7 game win streak, but I'm putting my faith in them. I think even on the road against Jacksonville, they'll be able to get it done. I just feel like coming off of a loss, they'll be more, hungrier to kind of correct the things that they've been slipping on recently in the last 3 to 4 weeks, and knowing that they can't slip too much further behind because, the Colts are trying to pick up some momentum and they don't want to fall into a situation where it comes down to the last game or two to decide the division. So I think that Houston will be able to pull it off. I feel like Jacksonville just hasn't shown me enough cohesiveness throughout the entire season for me to pick them to win this game. So I'm going with Houston as my lock of the week. And then lastly, for my underdog pick of the week. Now, the underdog pick of the week was tricky. I went back and forth between the team I picked, and I was also thinking about picking the Carolina Panthers. I could definitely see the Carolina Panthers pulling off the upset against Tampa Bay, but I didn't choose that one as my underdog pick of the week. This week's underdog pick of the week, I'm going with the San Francisco 49ers to beat the Buffalo Bills. Now, Buffalo is favored to win by 6 points. Buffalo is at home. San Francisco is traveling across country from West Coast all the way to East Coast. Kind of similar to what I mentioned in the Arizona versus Minnesota game, but worse. So it definitely makes sense why Buffalo is favored by 6. The way Buffalo has been playing lately and the way San Francisco has been playing lately, I could see Buffalo winning this game by double digits, honestly. But the difference here is that last time I checked, Brock Purdy is expected to play tomorrow. And I do feel like there is a significant difference between Brock Purdy playing and Brendan Allen playing. And I think it'll be enough to get them over the hump. I feel like the 49ers as a whole are kind of scratching and clawing to get back to where people expected them to be. I think if they lose this game, they're going to have a really tough time of making the playoffs, especially with everything that's going on in their division. I believe right now they're in last in the division, which essentially nobody expected them to be in. So they definitely got to get it together. This would definitely be the type of game that if they were able to win could catapult them forward through the rest of the season and get them back in the mix of being one of those teams that people are scared to play come playoff time. So I'm picking this as my upset pick of the week. I think that San Francisco does have the better coaching staff. So if there's any way that they're going to show that they can pull off the upset, I think this is the team that can do it. And so that's my underdog pick of the week. So that's it for this week's episode. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.